joining me today. My name is Heather Van Looy from Handcrafting with Heather. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to use the new Stampin' Blendabilities markers from Stampin' Up, which were used to make this card. These markers are alcohol-based, which allows them to blend beautifully while remaining color-fast so they won't fade. Every pack contains a set of 3 markers, each a different shade of the same Stampin' Up color, a light, medium, and dark version. Another feature that I love is that the barrels of these markers are rectangular so they won't roll away from you as you are working. Stampin' Blendabilities also come in a skin tone pack and as a color lifter, which I'll show you later. There isn't a right or wrong way to use these markers. Some people recommend coloring your lightest shade first and then moving to the darkest. Others recommend going dark to light. It's really a matter of personal preference. As I've explored with these markers this week, I tried both techniques out with each color set. Here you can see the results. I've found that the darker the color, the more difference you can see between the two techniques. I prefer coloring the darkest shade first because I think I'm able to get greater contrast in my colors using that method. Let me show you what I mean. Here you can see that I have colored in one of the flowers from Fabulous Florets using the Cherry Cobbler Blendabilities and the Pumpkin Pie Blendabilities. And you can see that there's a lighter shading here in this flower than there is here. I get a flatter tone. But when you go to the lighter shades of the Daffodil Delight, not as much of a difference. Coastal Cabana. I even did the skin tones. You really can't tell much difference with those. But when I get down here to the Rich Razzleberry set, again, there's a lot more light in this than there is in here. So I prefer going dark to light for my coloring. To use these markers, you need to use Memento Ink, which won't bleed when it comes in contact with the alcohol from the markers. And Stampin' Up! Recommends using Whisper White cardstock for best results. However, other colors of cardstock will work as well. As I said, there isn't a right way to use these markers. You can color with them the way that you would with any other marker, but they can do so much more. I had never used alcohol markers before I got these, and I am totally in love. Let me show you how to use them. I've already stamped the Fabulous Florets image in the Memento Ink on my Whisper White cardstock, and I'm going to use the Rich Razzleberry set for my coloring today. And as I said, I prefer to go dark to light, so I'm going to show you that method first, and then I may come back in and show you the other. The Stampin' Blendabilities markers have 2 ends, just like our regular Stampin' Write do, and I'm going to use the smaller tip, and I'm going to come in and sort of in a circular motion, just go in where I would want shading to be on a flower, darker towards the center, and curving up around the edges of the petal. Sometimes these markers will bleed a little bit at the edges, and they will go through to the back of your paper. So you want to make sure that you've got a protected work surface down. I wouldn't do this right on your wood kitchen table without something underneath. Okay, I've gone in and finished coloring in all of my dark areas for you just for the sake of speed. And now I'm going to come back in with the medium shade, and right over where I just colored, I'm going to, in a circular motion, go over what I just colored and then extend it out. And you can see that there is no harsh line where the colors are meeting. They really just blend right in together. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, show you again that they just blend together, and you just keep kind of in that circular motion going over the line where they meet. There will be a harsh line at first, but if you keep going over and over, it will disappear. If you tried to do that with regular markers, you would wear a hole in your paper. Okay, as you can see, I've finished up with my dark and my medium shades. And now I am going to come in with my light shade and just repeat that same procedure. I'm going to start at the edge and just blend over it until it blends in, moving towards the darker areas to blend, and then filling in the lightest areas. I'll do that again over here. And at first you can see there is a little bit of a line there, but as I just continue moving over it in a circular motion and then moving back into the darker areas, that line disappears. And I also find that this sort of changes as it dries a little bit. If you just watch it, it seems to lighten up and blend really nicely. So I've finished coloring in with my lightest shade, and you can see that I have a nice blended bloom here. But it's a little bit flat for me, so I like to have some highlights and some lowlights, some really dark tones in the shadows. So I'm going to go back in with my darkest shade, and just in those really, like right in the center of the flower here where I would want there to be a deep shadow, I'm going to color in again right here under the lip of this petal where it's coming out. I'm going to color in again. So just in the very deepest shadows, I come back in with that dark. And it doesn't really matter if it blends so much here, because in nature, these things would have a pretty harsh shadow to them. You know, this petal's underneath another one, so it would have a deep shadow there. This one's underneath this one, so I would come in with those, you know, darker shadows towards the edges. Like I said, it doesn't matter so much if it really blends, although I do think that it kind of blends a little bit on its own as it dries. If you find that you're not happy with it and that you think, oh, I want that to blend a little bit, then go in with, you know, your next color right at the edges and just blend it in a bit. Or you can go over with your lightest color over the whole thing and blend. And you can see that that harsh line just disappears. So that's what I do to get my deep shadows. To get my highlights, I use the Stampin' Blendabilities Color Lifter. And it is not an eraser, but it will lift the color. If you kind of go out of the edges a little bit, you can kind of push the color back in the lines where you want it to be. But I find if I just use this thicker brush tip and kind of just go over it a little bit, and it kind of works, it develops over time. When you first lay it down, you don't really see much difference, but then as it dries, it'll pick up some of that color and leave you with some highlighted areas. And you can, you know, go in and lift more. It will not erase and pick up all the color, so don't expect it to do that. But it will give you some nice highlights on the lightest parts of your flower. So like here in the center of this bloom, you get nice highlights right here on this edge. I want it to be lighter. And it's picking up that color. So that's how I use the Stampin' Blendabilities to get beautiful results. Now I'm going to show you how to do the light to dark technique in case you prefer that method. As you would expect, I'm going to start with the lightest color, and I'm going to just color in the entire flower, flood it with the lightest color. I should mention that inside, I don't know if you can see, there's like a narrow channel that the tip has to fit into. So you may want to put, oh, that's lovely. You may want to put your marker and the cap on a table and snap it in place in order to make sure that you don't damage the tip. We'll ignore my little mess. Then I come back in with the medium color, and I would do 2/3 of the way across. I'm switching to my lighter thing. I would come out about 2/3 of the way. And I'm going to turn off the camera and finish this part up, and then I will be back. Alright, so I've finished with my medium color, and as you can see, the lines are not nearly as blended as they were when I went from dark to light. Don't worry about that. We're going to fix that up in a little bit. And then, as you would expect, you're going to come in and do the same with the dark color coming out about 1/3 of the way, so that you've got, you know, a nice contrast between your three shades. Okay, so now that I've done my darkest color, I clearly do not have a blended look. So I'm going to come back in with my light color. This is where I feel like I don't get as much depth of color, because I have to go over my lightest color again in order to blend everything together. So I'm going over the whole thing and blending with the light, and I end up feeling like my lightest color gets darker through this process, giving me an overall blended but flatter look than I get with doing the dark to light. So that's why I prefer the other method. But you're doing the same thing you did before, going over it in a circular motion. Anywhere that there's a harsh line, you're just blending that in with this. But you'll see that you are getting, your lightest color is getting darker as we go over it and layer in. And because there's more ink, more layers of ink, the color lifter at the end doesn't seem to lighten to the same degree that it does with the dark to light method, where you only have one layer of the lightest color. Alright, so I've finished blending in with my lightest color. Now I'm going to come back in and do my darker tones with the darkest shade to get those darker shadows where I want them. And I'm going to come in with the color lifter to try and get my highlights back. So there's my dark. And let's do my color lifter and just see what I get here. So you can see I'm doing the same technique that I did before, but it's just not lightening up quite as much as it did when I had just one layer of this lighter color. After I finished filming my tutorial and I went back to look at it, I realized that my lights were shining unevenly and you couldn't really see an accurate representation of the finished product. So here is my dark to light version, which you can see has a lot more highlights, and this is the light to dark, which is overall a darker, richer color but with less contrast. Both beautiful but just different. It's really a personal preference of whichever one you like the best. Thanks so much for coming out to create with me today. I hope to see you again soon. Come visit me and leave me a comment on my blog, www.handcraftingwithheather.com. I love to hear what you think. Have a great day and happy stamping.